All right, today we're going to learn about integers. Your objective is to understand and order and compare integers. And this is page 12. All right, well, first of all, integers are all whole numbers and their opposites. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And their opposites, -1, -2, -3, etc. Okay, it does not include fractions or decimals. So anything in between would not count as an integer. Integers are just the exact whole numbers and their opposites. All right, and another thing I want you to add on here, write absolute value and absolute value just means how far is a number from 0, or the distance from 0. So go ahead and add that in because you're going to need to know that for something. All right, so I'm going to give you an example of absolute value. Let's say I have the number 2. Well, if I want the absolute value of this point, 2, I just want to know how far is it from 0. Well, 1, 2, it's 2. The way to show absolute value is you write the number and then you put 2 straight lines on either side. When you see those lines, that's the way you know that they're asking for absolute value. So the absolute value of 2 is 2. Now, if I take the opposite of that, -2. If I want the absolute value of -2, again, I just want the distance from 0. Well, how far is this from 0? 1, 2. It's also 2. So anytime you have absolute value, whether it's a positive or a negative inside your absolute value bars, it's always going to be just the number positive. Now, you can get to more complicated situations with absolute value where you have negatives on the outside and then it could be negative. But for the purpose of what we're doing in 6th grade, you're always going to see absolute value as given a positive answer because distance is positive. Okay, whichever direction I go, it's still 2 away from the 0. All right, so over here I have some keywords that you might see when we're dealing with integers. And so here are some keywords when we're dealing with positive integers: gain, up, forward, profit, deposit, above, find, win, increase, and earn. And then here are some negative keywords that would be on the negative side: loss, something goes down, backwards. If you're in debt, that means you owe money. Withdraw, below, owe, lose, or decrease. Now, I've picked out a few of these just to do more specific examples of. All right, so let's take a bank account for instance. These are 2 words. I would star this because these are often confused in past years: deposit and withdraw. If I deposit, that means I put money in my bank. If I put money in the bank, my bank account has grown. So that's a good thing, it's a positive thing. So when you put money in your bank account, or sort of like make a profit, that would be depositing. The opposite would be withdrawal. That's when you're taking money out. If I withdraw money to pay my bills, I'm losing money. So taking money out of your bank account or being in debt, those would be examples of withdrawing. Okay, now with football. Anytime that you gain yards in football, that would be a positive thing. Anytime you lose yards, get pushed back, negative. Another one, sea level. Well, sea level is a certain point, and it's called 0. So anytime you're above sea level or below sea level, that would be positive or negative. So if you're above, for example, if you were up climbing a mountain, you would be far above sea level. So that would definitely be positive. If you are diving in the ocean, that would be below sea level, so that would be a negative instance of an integer. And then temperature. On a thermometer, you have above 0 and below 0. So anytime that the temperature is above 0, that's positive. Anytime it's below would be negative. All right, so now we're going to look at 2 integers and we're going to compare them. Now the tricky thing about negative numbers is that you actually have to think backwards, okay? Let me show you why. if I draw a number line, and go ahead, you can draw this with me. Here's 0 in the middle. So I'm going to put a few on this side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and back the other way. -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. Well, if I'm looking at the negative side, the further I am to the right on a number line, the higher, or the larger the number. So these are the higher numbers, and these are the lower numbers. So when I'm looking at two numbers, if I find them on a number line, I know whichever number is further to the right is larger. Okay, so if you're looking at two negative numbers, here's -5. Well, where would -11 be? It can't be here, because I already have those. -11 would have to be further negative. It's like you owe more money to somebody. Would you rather owe $5 or owe $11? Well, I'd rather owe 5 because that means I'm going to have more money in the end. So then that means -5 has to be greater. So again, with negatives, you think backwards. The one that looks smaller is actually bigger. So this would be greater than. Okay, so go ahead and try this one and put your greater than or less than sign in. All right, again, because 17 looks bigger, I know it's actually smaller. It's like I would owe more money to someone. And this number is further away from 0. I can also think about which number is closer to 0. So in this case, since they're both negative, 13 is closer to 0, so that one is further to the right or more or higher. So this symbol would have to go like this. -17 is less than -13. All right, and then now we're just going to take a set of integers and put them in order. And again, it says least to greatest, so ascending. All right, so here's the tricky part is sometimes I have people that want to start with 0. But remember, 0 is not all the way to the left. It's in the middle. So all your negatives, you'll always have negatives first. Then you'll have your 0. Then you'll have positives. And then the tricky part is just to remember that when you are listing your negatives, you actually have to think backwards. Okay? So here's a negative, here's a negative, here's a negative. All right. Again, if I'm looking at these three negatives, which one is farthest away from 0? Because whichever one is furthest from 0 is further to the left or the lowest number. Well, if I look at this, 10 looks like it's the biggest, so it's actually the smallest. So -10 would have to start. All right, then I would have -7, and then -5 would be the closest to the 0. Okay, so now I've got all my negatives taken care of. Now I'm going to put my 0. And then last but not least, I have a 3, and it's positive, so it would be the greatest. So here's my numbers in order from least to greatest. -10, -7, -5, 0, and 3. All right, guys, keep practicing. See you next time.